Hello, Al Gelger the SideQuest Gamer here, and today, not only am I doing my first Sega Genesis review, I'm also doing my very first sports game review. Since Madden 15 came out recently, I'm going back in time to review Madden 95 for the Sega Genesis. So without further ado, let's roll the footage and take a look at this classic since it's turning 20 this November.
Hi everyone, welcome to John Madden Football.
I'll be honest, I am not much of a sports gamer. Sure, Tecmo Bowl and Punch-Out are great times on the NES, but those are more beginner-friendly. I also like to play some of those wrestling games on the Nintendo 64, but the first football game I've even played was when I was testing out games on the Atari 2600, and that was rather confusing. So forgive me if this review is a little short. The reason I chose the Sega Genesis version over the Super Nintendo version is because of the Sega Genesis advertised blast processing. And that's the only thing that Genesis does that Nintendo don't.
I can't believe I just said that.
In other words, the SNES exceeds the Sega Genesis at everything except processing speed. I have to say that Sega wasn't lying about the blast processing. Want evidence? Then I'll even throw in a clip of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And with a more ideal processing speed, the sports games are more likely to be more superior since they're faster and presentation would be better as a result. For the history lesson, Madden NFL is a multi-million-dollar video game franchise that is a series of football games created by EA founder Trip Hawkins. Why is it called Madden? Well, it's named after the former Super Bowl winning coach of the Oakland Raiders and color commentator John Madden, who was approached by EA to use his name and likeness to sell their new football game. John Madden agreed to loan his name and likeness to the game, but insisted that the game be a realistic as possible take on football simulation. The first game, simply called John Madden Football, was released only for the MS-DOS, Apple II, and the Commodore 64/128 computers. The first console release was also called John Madden Football, but was released in 1990 for the Sega Genesis and later the Super Nintendo in 1991, and is somewhat different than its 1998 PC counterpart. Unlike other football games, the team you are playing as is in third-person view rather than a top-down view like how you see the field on TV. It really does give a sense of realism. The gameplay is rage-inducing, but in a good way. You want to play a realistic football game? Then here it is, because the AI on the other team is smart. There is no difficulty settings. They will do everything in their power to make sure you don't gain any yards towards the goal. The game is difficult, but fair. Although one thing I've noticed is that every football player has the same exact speed, and the only advantage you have is how you group your team and how the opponent groups their team. There are many ways to play the game, but only hardcore football gamers would understand this. While I could look up all the terms used in the game modes in the Rosetta Stone that is the internet, I would just rather play the game since the modes won't affect the review that much. The controls are confusing. I looked all over the internet and I still don't know how to pass the ball to my other teammates. I know that B is to switch the different team members to play as, but that's before you have the ball in your possession. The other team was able to pass the ball to their teammates just fine. So it's possible there's a button combination, but I can't be too sure. As for sound, there's no music except for the main menu, which is perfectly fine since football games don't have music playing while the game is going on. The sound bits are really impressive. I thought it would eat up a lot of memory in the Sega Genesis cartridge just to produce speech sound. But you can frequently hear the coach, the sports broadcasters making fun of my skill, the audience, and the EA Sports when you start up the game. It's just really cool and feels like a televised football game. The graphics are pretty good. While all the football players on one team looks the same, the football field itself is well done. The pixels really resemble the synthetic grass, and even the painted NFL logo looks realistic. While graphics don't define a good football video game, it's just something nice to look at. Overall, I found this game to be rage-inducing, but flawless nonetheless. I'm not very good at sports games, and since the Madden games are the same game with minor improvements added every year, I won't rate this game. I cannot recommend this game to non-football enthusiasts, but if you're into it, I highly recommend you check it out. Some call this the best Madden game since it's the first game in the series to use the NFL and NFLPA logos, but this is the only one I've played so far, and maybe someday I'll check out Madden 98 for the PS1 just to see how well the Madden franchise did in the 3D transition. I also recommend this game to those collecting for their Sega Genesis. If there's one type of game that Sega Genesis does that Nintendo don't, it's definitely sports games, and Madden 95 is no exception.
Thank you all for watching this rather short review. For those of you who are not sports game enthusiasts, I understand, and don't worry, my next review is not going to be a sports game. Unless your sport is saving Meducan slaves on the odd little world of Oddworld Adventures 2. That's right. Since my Oddworld Adventures for the Game Boy review was well received among subscribers, and I simply had to make a follow-up review. It should be out in a few days, but for the time being, thank you for watching, and remember to stay awesome.